Ken Grant, our club sergeant at arms, will demonstrate his versatility today. He'll interview our speaker during our presentation, and he'll be joined later by David Fain, who's our club vice president for programs this year. And David will moderate questions through the chat feature at the tail end of Mary's presentation. Please enter your questions for our speaker during the presentation so David can summarize and present those questions during that portion of the program. All right, Ken, over to you.
Thank you, President Jimmy. I'm not sure what I'm looking at, but I'm sure it's incredibly important. All right, so let's kick this off. I first met Mary Bacarella when I was doing some work way back in the day with the American Heart Association. And Mary recall last year, JJ McKay came and spoke to us about the cannabis business. He was at, that's how I met JJ through Mary, JJ, Mary, JJ. Mary went up through the rungs at the Space Needle to end up as the VP of brand management. She then moved, oh, and if you're a fan of the Chihuly garden glass next to the Space Needle, that was one of Mary's big personal achievements. That was her baby. So if you love it, you should give her some love. She left the Space Needle to move over to SIF, where she was the managing director. Then she moved over to what we're going to learn about today as the executive director at Pike Place Market. On the side, she is a universal life minister and has married, indeed, someone on top of the Space Needle. She's crossed this country 12 times as part of a Nintendo rollout with games in the back of a truck working for Golden Harris. And if there's anybody on the phone, on the call today, on the show today from Monroe, Michigan, she is a proud daughter. Just so you know, because I did not know this, Monroe shock absorbers are from there. It's the home of Lazy Boy, you know, the what's it? And it's also where General Custer's wife was from. So if you're ever in a pub trivia night and something comes up about Monroe, Michigan, there you go. And speaking of the Space Needle, if you know anything about me, one of my greatest moments in my entire life was getting to the very, very top of the Space Needle so I could touch the light on the top. That was all thanks to Mary. I'll share that story with you one day. All right, Mary Bacarella, welcome to Seattle Rotary. Let's kick things off let's just get the lay of the land first with you. As you know, Lillian Sherman is part of our group, and Lillian runs the Pike Place Foundation. I was hoping that you could shape for us the difference between the foundation and the PDA. Let's start there.
Well, thank you, Ken. And I want to thank David, you, and all the members for inviting me to be here. So thank you very much. And it's a great question because Lillian gets questions about what I do all the time. And I get questions about what Lillian does all the time because they think that we must be one and the same or share the job. The Pike Place Market Preservation and Development Authority is what I am the executive director of. We oversee the entire 9 acres of the Market Historic District in the district. And so we do all of the operations. We oversee the leases for over 200 small businesses, 450 residents. We have roughly 200 craftspeople, 100 farmers, 5 social services. We're this little city inside of a city, and we oversee all of that operation, whether it's security, marketing, finance, whatever, that's what we do. I've got a staff of about 100. The foundation, I'm sure Lillian has shared with you, is the fundraising arm of this of the Pike Place Market in general, not of the PDA, but of the Pike Place Market. And we were started in 1973 through a charter after, as we were told about the history of this just now, in 1971, we won to keep the market, and the PDA was formed in 1973. In 1982, roughly when Ronald Reagan was in president, they were cutting a lot of funding for social services. So the PDA thought we need to get a foundation to raise money to help our social services. At that time, we had 4: clinic, preschool, hold on, I got them, senior center, and food bank. And now we have a 5th, which is our assisted living heritage house. That's why they were formed. And now they do way more. actually this year, in conjunction with us, we worked together. They started a small business fund because everything was about small business at the beginning of all of COVID. And they raised almost $700,000 and gave that out for the small business fund. They run our commons. They have 2 other funds that are safety net type funds. They work with all of our social services. They do food access. I'm looking at their annual report, if you can get that. They do a number of wonderful things. We run the market.
Okay, good start. What's your job within the market, within the PDA?
What is my job?
Yeah.
My job is to oversee all of the staff that runs the market. I need to be an advocate for the market to city officials, different city governments, that sort of thing. Like I said, we handle all of the operations of it. So that means I've got a 24-hour security staff here, and we do need that. We have big facilities. We have a residential group for our 450 residents, finance, marketing, all of that we do. Anything that running in literally a small city, we do for the Pike Place Market. And my job is I have a leadership team that oversees all of that, and that's what we do. And that's my job. And it changed quite a bit during COVID, Ken.
Yeah. Which we'll get to.
And just one thing about what my job is sometimes the market is a fabulous and wonderful and complex and complicated thing. And we all run into each other trying to do our business. And sometimes the decisions the PDA has to make affects different people in different ways. And it makes it for some really interesting decisions and discussions and working at the market.
I'm curious, in a yes or no answer, back to what Faith had mentioned and what you had teased about before, how close was the market to being pushed down? That's not a yes or no. Was it really close?
At a time, it took like 6 years to get to 1971 and the vote. It was, I mean, there were developers that wanted to take it down. It was the urban renewal, and it was a grassroots group of people. And Victor Steinberg led it, and Wing Luke, but it was touch and go. But the Seattle voters, they saved this market.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think we're all very glad to this day that we did that. Well, people that can vote. Anyway, let's talk. We want to talk a lot today about the how you made it through COVID. But before we get to that, I want to get to what COVID felt like first. I want to talk about the fear of, like, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's a thing called COVID-19, right? The coronavirus. Walk us through the very first moment that you started to realize that with this thing called COVID basically coming towards all of us. What did that feel like? What did that look like?
Well, I was reading the articles just like probably everybody else was, but wasn't really quite understanding. I mean, what that would mean to us here in Seattle, United States, whatever. I remember calling a few of my contemporaries and other businesses going, what are you doing? Are you watching this? What do you think? And everybody's like, I don't know, we're trying to figure it out. There was no one that really had any answer. And then February 29th, leap year of last year, we have this big event in February called Love in the Market. And we love our locals, come on down. Exactly, Ken. We love our locals, come on down. We have events. Our crafters do a number of different things, and it's just really, really fun. And I was sitting exactly here, right here at this computer, watching Dow Constantine tell us we had the first casualty in Seattle during that event. And I went, what does this mean? And just like everyone else, we kicked it into high gear, trying to figure out, what do we need to do? And that was the first thing that it hit us. And then after that, everything changed.
Okay, so let's take that down a step. You started today's conversation with how many vendors you've got, how many residents you have. What does this look like to a vendor in a place like this, right? It hits you first. What's that? Well, how do you react to that as a small vendor that's selling, flowers?
Well, as it started to unroll those first 2 weeks before we got into quarantine and everything, I have to say my staff and my team, especially my commercial asset team, the one that oversee our tenants, our commercial tenants and small businesses, and our day stall market masters that oversee our crafters and farmers, all they did all day long was talk to the 500 small businesses in the market and listen to their stories. And what are you going to do? And at the first few days, we're like, we don't know what we're going to do because we don't know what we're supposed to do. So it was just constant talking to our 500 small businesses and people in the market saying, we're trying to get the information. We're getting it from the state. We're getting it from the county, the city. And it was, and once everything started shutting down, we had to shut the whole market down except for our essential businesses, meaning produce, butcher, fish, those type of businesses just at the beginning. And we became the face of the devastation of downtown Seattle for the world. I had people all over the country that were my cousins, and everybody was dealing with it in their own way. My family going, you were just on CNN, you were just there. And it was the market because there was no one here. And the stress level of our poor small businesses on what does this mean? And nobody had an answer was so high. And so we just thought we just need to listen first because we don't even know yet what we need to do.
Yeah, that's a good lesson in listening, right? In asking and just sitting back and going, okay, what do you need?
Yeah.
Tell us about the worst moment that you recall at the beginning of the whole COVID thing. Is there a moment in time you're like, oh no?
The worst moment is when I remember telling a friend, my friend Michelle over at Julie Garden and Glass, I said, well, I got to figure out the next 2 weeks. And she's like, 2 weeks? It was like, I didn't even know what to do at that point. And so we actually put we have a whole book about what do you do in a pandemic? How do you shut this down? So when they were shutting everybody down, we made our decision that we wanted our essential businesses open because we needed to keep the market open for our neighborhood, because we were essentially like the grocery store and we needed to have our presence here. And it was really interesting. People really looked to the market to be their touchstone, their respite, something familiar, but you asked me what the worst feeling was. It was those first couple of weeks when we were shut down and I walked through the market. We literally had 35 businesses open. And I walked every single day, every day for a very long period of time, just talking to them every morning, every afternoon, what's going on and hearing their fears. And then there was all of the back end stuff of talking to everybody on the phone of, I don't think I'm going to make it. I mean, what was really amazing to me is you heard all these stories of, I don't think I'm going to make it, to where we are now, and 97% of our businesses are open. So, it was amazing.
In that moment of walking through the market with that few people, compare that to what the rest of Seattle looked like. Because a lot of us didn't go downtown for a long, long time. I heard some people before this meeting today who hadn't gone downtown until yesterday.
There's a lot of people that still aren't going downtown. That was February 29th was the first when, Dow Constantine made his announcement. In the middle of July, I remember walking downtown, literally downtown, because most of the time I stayed in the market. And I walked downtown and it was noon. And I literally I stood in the middle of Westlake and took 4 pictures to send back to my director of marketing. I found 4 people downtown, 4 in Westlake. And we had our 35, 37 businesses open. So we had a few more people because they were shopping. There was no one downtown. And then if you remember, on top of COVID, the demonstrations started. Mm-hmm. And so not only were we trying to figure out the safety we King County gave us over 100,000 masks. They gave us all of this hand sanitizer that we gave to anybody that was open or who needed it. We had to put signage up everywhere, walk one way and out the other. We learned that from the grocery stores. We had signage everywhere. We were constantly cleaning, constantly cleaning. Then we had our residents, if you don't mind me explaining this, we had 450 residents and most of them are low income or senior. And a lot of them are compromised. And a lot of times somebody gets picked up by an ambulance here and gets taken to the hospital. But at the time we're like, We had to track them down. We had to copy their fob. When was the last time we saw them? When was the last time they used their fob or the door? And then we'd have to call them and go, this was the saddest story. We called somebody that got taken to the hospital, and he goes, are you calling about our rent? And we're like, no, we really want to know if you can tell us, if you don't mind, why you're there, because we had to know if it was COVID, because we have all of these different buildings filled with senior and compromised residents. And every time I say this, knock, 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 we did, as far as I know, we did not have one COVID in our residential building.
Wow. That's extraordinary. I did not know that.
I hate saying that out loud because we're not out of it yet.
Okay, interesting. Go back a second, if you would. You started mentioning before that you had to create a whole new game plan. How to walk us, and it's really the bulk of today's conversation, right? Is how many things, not just the cliched word of pivot, but how many things did you have to rebuild? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is not normality. I'm bored with that question, but will the things that you had to shift, will they be sticking with you for now, forever?
Well, so let me tell you a little bit about one more thing about the PDA. I think I told you all our money comes from rent and parking. That's it. We don't get an annual fee from the city. Sometimes we borrow money from the city. Sometimes they give us money to build a market front, but we do not get any operating money from the city or anyone. It all comes from rents or parking. Nobody was paying rent because nobody was open. We had no money coming in. We have 800 parking stalls, and it's very funny. I mean, it's a great place to park for people. And the 2018 and 2019 were record years of our parking. We went down to like 17 cars a day, from like 1,400 cars a day, because they come in and out, to like 17 cars a day. Everything, just any form of any sort of money coming in stopped. So the first thing we had to do was like, well, how do we stop this bleeding? So you go to the budget and you go to your reserves. And so we stopped all capital. There's and we have all these historic buildings. So unless it was an emergency, we do about $2.5 million worth of capital a year around here of fixing buildings and things. Everything stopped. And we also put money away in capital. That obviously no money come in, no money going in our capital reserves. We had to do that. Because of the type of public entity we are, we couldn't go to anybody. We couldn't get any PPP. We fell through the cracks. No PPP, no money, no grants, nothing like that. So we went through the budget. And my staff, I have to say, $2.2 million we cut in labor for last year. That was reduction in salaries, reductions in positions, and reduction in hours. And the thing was, we couldn't do it to security. We couldn't do it to resident. There were certain departments you had to have 24-hour security, clean the market and take care of your residents and fix things. It was, so we cut in labor. We cut in all of our expenses, and we tapped into our reserves. Our council had to approve tapping into our reserves. So we had an operating reserve where we tapped into, and they said you could tap into 2 million. And if that wasn't enough, to tap into 2 million of your capital reserves. But we only tapped into about 1 million of that. And now we're starting to pay back because, we were just kind of, when people would get rent, they wanted to pay rent. But the other thing, the reason they wanted to pay rent is because my commercial department and my council banded together and said, we need to give rent credits to our tenants. So total rent credits that we've given so far is $3.6 million in rent credits to our little over 200 tenants. And then couple that with what the foundation we're giving the grants out of there, roughly 700,000, we could really help our tenants move along. And then we also had all the moratoriums from the state and the city that so it didn't even matter. We couldn't collect rent if we had to because of the moratorium. So, but we understood that not only do you have the moratoriums, but you got to help them. And so we did that. We reduced day stall table rentals. We waived fees. We provided education, and the foundation helped with this for every, I swear, every loan grant that was out there for every different group of, whether it was small business, whether it was arts, whether it was farmers, whether it was residential. We put out probably, we used to put out, you know, this roof's being fixed, or we have this program, or whatever. We called them tenant alerts. We put out probably in the last year over 200 tenant alerts, all about COVID. Whether it was something you had to do, whether the phase changed, whether it was a new ordinance, or whether it was a new grant. And with those grants that we were sending out, we would also have online classes to teach you how to apply for PPP, how to apply for the city grants, that sort of thing. And what was really great about that is the community came together, because there were bigger businesses that knew how to do this. And they're like, we'll help you teach it. Mm-hmm. And we had artists that do this for their own business, like, we'll help you teach it. So it was a huge, huge community effort. And the other thing is, our essential businesses that were first open, those 35 to 37, saw how everyone else was struggling. So a number of our businesses, produce and other small businesses that could stay open, bought flowers from our farmers and sold them along with their businesses to keep the farmers going. And then Olga from Piroshki, she put together a website where people could order takeout or delivery. I mean, different people just tried so many different things, different community members, different tenants, along with the entire community, the foundation and us. It was this big effort to move this through this.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. It really does come back down to community. It became community really 50 years ago, right? It became community 50 years ago. It's still community. We got time for one last thing, and I'm really curious, because you are one of my besties, how this affected you personally.
Oh, Ken, it's the hardest job I've ever had in this COVID. And it's the most rewarding, because obviously all these small businesses are starting to come back again. It was rewarding to work in this community to help them come back. And the feeling of looking down the street at noon and seeing nothing, and how devastating that was, to now coming down here, when the doors opened one day from parking and I saw a cruise ship and all these people, I almost burst into tears. I'm like, oh my God, how did we get through this? And I will say this, Ken, and you can call me on this. You can totally, because you know that's our relationship. To call on this, I said, is there anything that will happen in any part of my career again that will make me feel this way? Because we got through a global or we're getting through, sorry, not there yet, getting through a global pandemic. What could be harder than that? So yeah. I hope I don't complain anymore, Ken.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Before I send this over to David and Memik, I do have one last question. You know, you were raised in Monroe, Michigan, like we talked about in the beginning. What in the world, where along your entire career path got you prepared for any of this?
Of COVID?
Yeah. What did you learn? I mean.
So let me tell you, if you really want to know, I had Italian or Sicilian. My parents were, you know, first generation or second generation, lived through the Depression. And so my life was all about, you know, making sure you watch your money. We were very, very Catholic. So there was everybody in my family volunteers. Everybody in my mother always taught me to care about the underdog. That was my mother. My mother was about that. And so in my background, that stuff was really, really important to my family. Give back, you know, make sure you have money you can spend and save money. I mean, that helped with the budget. What can you spend? What can't you spend? But then just the career that I had, I guess the biggest was during 9/11. That was the first when we had to shut things down at the Space Needle, and then the recession was even worse. So in smaller parts, I was part of an organization that had to do this. There is nothing, and I need to say nothing like what happened, me personally, in COVID at the market.
Yeah. I like the fact that you throw this back on your parents. I think that's brilliant. That's such a reflection on how you were raised, and you bring that all the way forward to today. That is awesome. I'm going to send this over now to David Fain, who is sitting on some questions, and I see some of them. They're very good. So David, you and Mary can have a chat. Thank you, Mary, for being here today. I really appreciate it. Awesome conversation.
Mary, it is great to see you again. Thank you for joining us. And as promised, you and Ken, the two of you probably could go on for hours. So I do want to start with a question, because I feel like this is the trifecta of great news for the market, because this week you had the cruise ships return, you had a article or a front page article in the Puget Sound Business Journal, and not to be third fiddle, but you're here with us at Rotary. So would you just talk to us a little bit about what all of those things mean to you and to the market?
Well, what really is amazing is that, you know, the market is world renowned. The market is world renowned. Everybody knows it. It's everybody's favorite place to come in Seattle, one of them. And to see during all of COVID how people really cared about the market, but more importantly than just the caring, is that they felt like it was their home, their respite, their touchstone. I mean, I heard so many people say when it came down to the market, it kind of felt a little more normal, even when there was nobody down there. And so it's just how much the market means to our community, but also now with the cruise ships, what it means to the nation, the world, visitors, whatever. And it's so amazing that this community is what built it. And I think because of 113 years of that, this, like I said, one of the saddest things is we were the face of the devastation, but now we're the face of it coming back. And let me tell you, that's way more fun, David. Way more enjoyable, and it feels better.
Okay, so this one's a little bit of a softball, but this probably would come from Ken Grant, knowing how he thinks.
Oh, God.
But how do you measure foot traffic? Because is there somebody who is walking around counting the number of people?
We have pedestrian counters.
And it's a two-part question, because it's like, how do you measure success of the market, and how do you measure foot traffic at the market?
There's a number of ways we measure. We obviously don't sell a ticket, so we can't do that. We have pedestrian counters at the entrances to the markets. So that's that's how we get our pedestrian counts. That's why when we said before this 15 million, that's how we got them. Right now, I think we're at 7 for the year. We measure it by parking, because how many people come to the market. And we also, just like any other landlord, you get your sales from your tenants, and we measure it by their sales.
Oh, okay, that makes total sense. So you have a way of actually tracking how each stall is doing and kind of progressing. Okay. This is a great question from our Rotarian, David Bobanek. Can you talk a little bit about balancing the market as a major tourist attraction with the importance as a community resource for farmers, community members, etc.?
Well, what's interesting is we were built on a charter. And I think I mentioned at the beginning, we are to support small businesses, support low income, support farmers. Every decision we make, we look at our charter. And our charter is about community. That's why it was saved. But we also have to balance it with making money, no doubt about it, because we run by making money. That's the only way. I mean, for our operating costs to be able to have security, we need to make money. So it's really wonderful that the world and tourism sees us and loves us. But we have our community. Our foundation is very big in keeping our community together. Our community is very big in helping each other and keeping our community together, all along with we're part of that conversation. What's really interesting, we always, at least since I've been here, I've only been here 4 years, we have started when doing marketing campaigns on the shoulder seasons, because the tourists also used to come, and locals would say, we don't want to come down when the tourists are here. But here's a little known fact. If you get here before 10:30 or get here after 3:30 in the middle of the summer, you can pretty much walk through and get whatever you need. But because of this year, we actually amped up our marketing and did a whole locals marketing campaign. I don't know if you saw it because it was the first time we ever did TV to get people to come down here. And what the foundation says, which is really great, is to shop intentionally. And we ask that. Come shop at the market. Your market supports a community. So,
fabulous.
Answer it?
Yes, no, it does. It's absolutely terrific. What does COVID mean to the development plans to connect down to the waterfront with the steps, as I understand it, going down to the aquarium? Because as part of this massive redevelopment, for anyone who's been down to the market, the backside is absolutely fabulous, and you know what that looks like. But if you just give us a little insight to reconnecting the sea, as I understand it, to Pike Place, right?
It actually, yes, but it actually also starts up with the Pike Pine Renaissance. It starts up in Capitol Hill, comes all the way down, goes through the market, and goes down to the waterfront. And that stopped for a brief moment in COVID, but it is in full swing right now. The aquarium's doing some of their work. The city is building the main corridor, which is the street that is now where the viaduct used to be, but it's on the street. We just, in the last 6 months, they rebuilt the entrance to our parking lot on Alaskan Way because the street's going to be navigate up. And so instead of coming in on the first floor, you have to come in on the second floor. So they filled in the first floor entrance and built a second floor entrance. The Overlook Walk design, I believe, is at 100%. And the Overlook Walk is what's going to connect the market front through the aquarium down to the waterfront. All of that is still happening.
Fabulous. That is great news. We have an insightful question that maybe is kind of a little bit midstream from Dr. Richards, our member. Looking back on this entire experience, is there anything that you would have done differently? And I say midstream because I don't feel like we're on the other side of COVID and we're in the middle of the criticism, but is there anything when you're sitting back at night and you go, you know, that's something I might have really thought through differently or done differently or brought other people into?
That's a really, really good question. And I haven't thought of it because it hasn't stopped yet. We're working just as hard. So it hasn't been easy to reflect yet. I reflect a lot, but I haven't been able to because it's just constantly trying to get through it. I don't even know if this makes sense. We were starting to look at the face of retail before any of this happened and the changing face of retail. And you need to come down and visit in person. So what does that mean? That's something we need to look at as we move forward. And I'm not saying there isn't a reflection. I'm just saying, I don't think we've been able to take a breath yet to reflect. And it's been all about, just trying to get through it. And I'm really sorry, but maybe in a couple months I can answer that question.
I think that's more than fair. So I've got a few more questions and we've got about 3 minutes left. When you look about utilizing your board, whether it's your kitchen cabinet or your kitchen cabinet or your informal people, and then there's the formal people of the board, and what that experience has been like and how that transitions a little bit, because it'll give us insight as we also emerge, as our club emerges back into the community. But any words of wisdom or thought in terms of how that kind of went?
I have to really thank our council, and we are a council of 12. I have a council of 12 people. That's what the PDA has. 4 of them are mayoral appointees, but we get to take them to the mayor. 4 of them are voted on by the council, and 4 of them come from our community. So they are coming from all different places. But our council, the staff and the council stepped up. It was, what do we need to do to get through this? Tell us what you need and what do you need to do? They ask you got to ask the hard questions that nobody wants to hear. And you have to ask them, and then you have to figure them out. When we were starting to do the credits, one of our council members said, because we started right away, like in April, we started credits. We didn't know what was going on. And they said, is this the right time? We don't know how long this is going to go on. And that was a question we had asked ourselves. But our tenants were so stressed out and so afraid, completely understanding that it was like, we need to start something to make people just even go, okay, we're starting to work with this. And they asked the really hard questions, but in the end, they made the decisions to help us move forward through this. And I can only say that they've done an amazing job. And the staff has come up with all of these things to bring to the council to pass.
Well, Mary, they say that some leaders are born and some leaders are made. And I think you're the epitome of both. The right person at the right time with the right energy. And thank you so much for, joining us, here today. I look forward to seeing you live for sure. And, thank you again for your time and insight. We've really enjoyed this, time together.
Well, David, thank you. Thank Ken, and thank you all. Thank you so much for letting me be here.
All right, a couple of quick shout outs. We're going to thank Liz Powell with Remax on Market for stepping up and becoming a gold sponsor, along with our very adoring Bob Alexander. If you want to become a sponsor, please get a hold of Caroline. All right.